Welcome to our G4 project. For our character, we'll be focusing on the lizard. What's green, mean, and transforms into a killing machine? Not the Hulk, or at least not only the Hulk. The lizard is a classic villain from Spider-Man's universe, having first debuted in 1963. His civilian identity is Curtis Connors, a retired army surgeon turned scientist who lost his arm in combat. In a desperate bid to regrow his lost limb, he turned to the wonders of science. In retrospect, it's pretty obvious that it was a bad move, especially in a world where such accidents seem fairly common.
Dr. Curtis Connors concocted a serum in hopes of regenerating his arm, inspired by the similar powers to that of some reptiles. The serum was a mixture of various types of reptilian DNA made in hopes of regenerating his arm. This wouldn't work because the enzyme DNase I deconstructs the foreign DNA and does not allow it to replicate. But, science aside, the serum worked. His arm grew back better than ever. However, he was transformed into a lizard. After a scuffle with Spider-Man and a brief spell of being cured, he attempts to perfect his serum once more. His arm comes back again, and along with his brand new arm came a wonderful new side effect, turning him into the giant lizard monster. He turned into what is essentially a reptilian Hulk, except with less brute strength and more intelligence. With this newfound transformation, he was completely revamped. He has an incredible amount of new powers too. These include rage pheromones, super strength, super toughness, being a lizard, low-level telepathy, and regenerative powers.
For obvious reasons, the existence of a man who transforms into a lizard will not be fully supported by science. But if some aspects of the lizard's existence are be to accepted despite their incredulity, then some of his other characteristics have scientific plausibility. Take for example his incredible strength. He is said to be able to lift 12 tons, which is 10,886 kilograms. The greatest weight lifted ever by a human is 2,850 kilograms. Lizard would thus be 3.8 times stronger than the strongest of humans. To lift such weights, he would have to provide an unequal force to accelerate the weight off the ground. So his muscles have to provide a force stronger than the gravitational force of the object, or at least 106,792 newtons of force. Were he indeed to possess this power, then jumping 18 feet in the air would be no problem for our reptilian. 106,792 newtons of force used to push downwards would give him an acceleration of 427 meters per second squared, or an initial velocity of 13 meters per second. For vertical leaps, the relationship between initial velocity and height is given by initial velocity squared equals 2 times the gravitational acceleration times height, so a lizard could reach heights of 8.6 meters or 28 feet.
In terms of powers, there's nothing like regeneration. Lose a limb, doesn't matter, it'll come right back. But how does it grow back? Well, through a process of forming a blastoma made of undifferentiated cells. This means that they already know their place and their purpose. From there, the cells just fill in the gap to create the newly regenerated limb.
Miscellaneous powers, or the sport of being punched through a building. Speaking of magical lizard DNA, the Godzilla wannabe has given himself a few advantages with his new lizard body. In both villainy and heroism, there's quite a bit of fighting involved. Whether you're being thrown out a window, kicked into a tree, or any combination of some bodily assault that should probably see one or both participants very dead. Luckily for them, they're superpowered. Since we're discussing sports medicine, I want to equate this as closely to sports as possible. There are many sports that involve direct fighting, and these sports are called combat sports. This includes martial arts, judo, Muay Thai, and Taekwondo. Since clashes between the villain and hero characters typically involve hands-on fighting, we're giving their fights the working definition of a combat sport. we'll mostly be discussing how the lizard's possible anatomy either gives him an advantage in the fight or prevents injuries. His ability to walk off gunshots. In many universes, the lizard seems either mostly unaffected by the bullets or just walks them off. In a similar vein, he fights Spider-Man and comes out unscathed, or at the very least, alive. This could be explained through the fact that the lizard, like all reptiles, have hard scales that cover his body. In nature, these scales are made of two types of keratin. Keratin, made of insoluble proteins, is the stuff in your hair and nails. The two types of keratin are alpha type and beta type. Alpha type keratin can be found in mammals, but beta type keratin is more exclusive to reptiles and birds. The scales grow on the reptile's epidermis. Beta type scales, which are harder and rougher, grow on the outside. Alpha type scales, which are softer and more flexible, can be found closer to the inside. While the scales would have to be extremely thick to resist bullet damage, it would still prevent many skin injuries that come from fighting. It's also possible that the bullets do some damage, and the lizard just chooses to ignore it. Their keratinized layer causes sensations to dull, which is why many lizards can get thermal burns when in captivity. An add-on possibility is the osteoderm, which can't be seen from the outside. The osteoderm is a layer of bone deposits in the dermis, which is underneath the scaly epidermis. It could act as an additional layer of protection. With thick-skulled animals, there is a small possibility that bullets will ricochet due to a steep angle. This could somewhat help explain the lizard's ability to weather both Spider-Man's blows and also avoid great physical trauma from any incoming bullets. His ability to walk on walls. The lizard has been depicted clinging to multiple surfaces off the ground, helping put him on even ceiling with Spider-Man. A similar ability is seen in geckos, who have thousands of microscopic setae on each foot. Setae are tiny toe hairs that split at each end. Each split are called spatula, with 400 to 1,000 spatula per hair. These dry adhesive systems use Van der Waals forces, or molecular attractions. This occurs when polarity is temporarily induced by electron movement, creating a weak attraction between two molecules. The lizard is much larger than your standard gecko, of course, and research has revealed this scale is dealt with in nature through two factors. First is an increase in surface area. More hairs equal more stick. Second is a decrease in flexibility. The less flexible the hairs, the more adhesive force it has. As organisms become larger and therefore heavier, these hairs multiply and also become stiffer. This could allow the lizard to maneuver himself into many more advantageous positions, whether it be to avoid injuries or get the jump on his opponent. The fact that he can stick on the ceiling means that he could also get up to places without facing the risk of any muscular strain.
Let's talk about the lizard and how technology and computing relates to him. When adapting the lizard for film, computers played a huge role, and his appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man is almost entirely based around computer-generated graphics. VFX artists and modeling, as opposed to practical effects, give the filmmakers a lot more flexibility in his portrayal and showing him the way that they wanted to. Computers simulated realistic muscle movement, physics, and reptile-like features that immersed the viewer in the movie and his character. After wreaking havoc as the lizard in the comics, Connors wanted a second chance at society. To do so, he was implanted with an artificial computer chip in his body, which allowed him to calm and regulate his outbursts of turning into the lizard. The question is something like that realistic and possible in the real world? The answer is a resounding yes. Pacemakers, insulin pumps, artificial limbs, and other bodily attachments we see being used today are already examples of computers being part of humans themselves. Hans Solbold, a pioneer in biohacking, has a goal to push humanity further by integrating their bodies and lives with technology. His company has already embedded people's fingers with NFC chips to replace things like keys and ID to reduce clutter and streamline people's lives. Despite the possible security risks of having technology be literally part of you, the hopes are in the future this can be used to further connect people in the world. By watching our presentation, we hope we've been able to provide an insight into how all groups of science come together to show why the lizard is the lizard.